this is Decelony, and we're stopping off in the 1980s in this video. We're going to take a look at some kind of big, well-produced, clean, slick records, kind of the opposite of the kind of thing we've been looking at in all my videos so far. Anyway, we may skirt a little close to the kind of the guilty pleasures, the kind of the cheesy here, but I genuinely like all these records. So let's go. Yeah, unranked, chronologically ordered. Here we go. And first up, from 1980, we have the Ramones with their End of the Century album. This was produced, infamously some would say, by Phil Spector. You know, this was pretty much his last big production job after his kind of 60s heyday, you know, doing all the kind of the girl groups, the Ronettes. He did very big pop acts of the 60s, Righteous Brothers, Ike, Tina Turner. And he had some work with the Beatles. He worked a little on Let It Be and did produce kind of 70s stuff from, you know, Yoko Ono, John Lennon, George Harrison. Anyway, with this album, with the Ramones, yeah, it does have that typical Spector, the wall of sound. You know, the production is there on some tracks. Do you remember Rock and Roll Radio? Their version of Baby I Love You. Yeah, they're kind of touched by that kind of, you know, doo-wop harmonies and kind of 60s girl group feel. Yeah, some of the more kind of classic Ramones numbers, the punkier style Ramones numbers, they do fare pretty well here. There's a great cover of the Heartbreakers' Chinese Rocks. A couple of other tracks like, you know, Let's Go and This Ain't Havana. They're pretty good. I think the real gem of this album and why it kind of still works as an album is Danny Says, which is kind of one of the warmest, kind of most pretty, kind of lovelorn little ballads that the Ramones ever made. This track is all about Joey Ramone and his vocal, and he carries it so well. The 80s would turn out to be a pretty mixed decade for the Ramones. Some highs, some lows. But I think End of the Century is probably certainly the highlight of this period. Okay, 1982, brace yourself. This is Haircut 100 with the Pelican West album. Yeah, this is one that I should probably hate myself for including. You can hate me for me if you like. It does flirt a bit close to the guilty pleasures thing, like I said, but I like the record, so, you know, you'll probably be surprised when you get deeper into this 10 to find that, you know, this isn't the only thing that I should be feeling guilty about. Yeah, not much to say about Haircut 100 other than, you know, they were a big pop act for a very short period. The singer, the kind of the focal point of the band was Nick Hayward. He was deeply uncomfortable with the kind of the boy band teeny pop kind of pin-up thing that was getting attached to them because they had a string of top 10 hits. And he left within a year of this album's release. All the hit singles are here. Favorite Shirts, Love Plus One, and Fantastic Day. All top 5, I believe, in the UK in that year. Yeah, the sound is this kind of chirpy, catchy, clean, white funk, hints of kind of Latin rhythms and instrumentation. Very poppy, very fun, very carefree pop songs. Also in 1982, we have Songs of the Free by Gang of Four. This is their third album, and it's actually a pretty great Gang of Four album. They managed to keep their edge intact here. It remains kind of unblunted by this slicker, dancier kind of production. Regarding the band, yeah, Dave Allen had left before this album was made. He started a band called Shriekback, and he'd been replaced by Sarah Lee on bass. Yeah, the big hit track off this album was I Love a Man in Uniform. Kind of quite a big dance floor hit, you know. The 12 inches and the remixes of this did very good business for Gang of Four. But there's some really good kind of classic early to mid-period Gang of Four tracks on this record. The production doesn't really affect them in any way. In fact, there's a trio of songs on the second side, which begins with I Will Be a Good Boy, then The History of the World, and We Live As We Dream Alone, which rank up there with some of Gang of Four's greatest. They did create another album after this, which was, if anything, even slicker and more polished than Songs of the Free. That album was hard. They'd lost Hugo Burnham, their drummer, by that time. Yeah, this one, it's more of the same, but I think a lot of their politics and the kind of the interesting parts of their lyrics had kind of got diluted down along with the sound here, so I wouldn't really recommend this one. It's okay. 1984, yeah, biggest band of the year, probably. They're kind of behind me on the screen, you might see. This is Welcome to the Pleasuredome by Frankie Goes to Hollywood. This record is infamously kind of uneven, very patchy. but it seems to be everywhere. It's kind of a car boot sale, constant fixture. You find it everywhere for not a lot of money. But, you know, I'm going to stick up for this album. It's got a place in 80s pop kind of lore. And yeah, I'm going to defend it for a few seconds here. So Frankie had been around since about 1980. They'd even recorded a Peel session in 82, which did feature kind of prototype versions of Two Tribes and Crisco Kisses, I believe, from this album. Yeah, everyone should know the hits from this record, this period. Relax, Two Tribes, The Power of Love, and the title track. And in fact, it's the title track is the thing which completely dominates and saves this album. Welcome to the Pleasuredome. It's just one of the greatest pieces of pop production of the 1980s. Trevor Horn, responsible for that. Yeah, it's just 13 and a half minutes on the album, a whole side of this kind of extended Cold War, kind of prog, funk, stadium pop. It's just genius. It really is. It's almost a work of art, this track. Yeah, the record has a reputation for being patchy and a bit slim. It's kind of quite padded with covers. Some of the covers are quite good, though. The cover of War is pretty good. And a cover of Born to Run, which is okay. But yeah, this album is all about Welcome to the Pleasuredome, that track. Yeah, it's, as I say, just an amazing piece of 1980s production using the technology of the day. Same year, a little later, around about November, we get Aural Sculpture by the Stranglers. Yeah, the Stranglers had been kind of heading in a more and more pop direction throughout the early 80s. Their La Folie LP of 1981 had yielded the single Golden Brown, went at number 2 in the UK charts. It was only kept off number 1 because of some slight controversy regarding kind of, you know, heroin or drug references within the song. You know, this is a really different sounding band to that kind of dark, grinding, grubby, you know, brawling, you know, aggro Stranglers of their kind of punk new wave period. In fact, this whole album sounds like a really committed push to make, you know, the pop record that they've been trying to make. And for the most part, it succeeds. Skin Deep, the single, is an absolute stone cold classic. It's one of those songs where when you first hear it, it'll make you stop and go, wow, what is that? You'll find it hard to believe it's the Stranglers if you've never heard it before. Yeah, again, this is the Stranglers going pop. Don't expect, you know, something like Peaches or Hanging Around or Tank even. There are some pretty cool tracks on this album. The opener Ice Queen is really good. Let Me Down Easy, Uptown, also highlights of this album. Okay, 1985, the summer of 1985, in fact, and we get Cupid and Psyche 85 by Scritti Politti. Yeah, you couldn't get a cleaner kind of break with that kind of post-punk DIY, the mesthetics of Green Gartside, who was by this time the only surviving member of the original lineup of Scritti Politti. So yeah, the album was written and recorded in New York City. He recruited Dave Gamson on keyboards and kind of programming, and Fred Mayer on drums. Yeah, it was very, very heavily influenced by the kind of the more pop R&B records from the USA, that period in the mid-80s. Yeah, Cupid and Psyche is an entirely studio-based construction. You know, everything was sampled or programmed. It is pristine sounding. Yeah, it's only recently, during a kind of a reformation period, that Green has managed to be able to put together a band to play this stuff live. They never played this music live, really, at the time. Yeah, the album spawned several hit singles. The Word Girl, Absolute, and probably my favourite of all of these is Would-Be's Pray Like Aretha Franklin. Very, very slick, very processed, very hyper-sounding records. But the lyrics, you know, they're typical Green Gartside. They're very smart, they're very intellectual, very inquisitive. But in this case, he's managed to marry those lyrics to kind of the sweetest, slickest kind of syrupy pop sounds of the 1980s. 85 summer, again, same time, we get Steve McQueen by Prefab Sprout. This is the second album from Paddy McAloon. And yeah, Paddy's he's a very old school kind of singer, songwriter. He's really into the craft of songwriting. Yeah, as well as venerating all the usuals like Lennon and McCartney, he loves Cole Porter, George Gershwin. And at the time as well, he was obsessed with Quincy Jones and the stuff he was doing with Michael Jackson. Very fond of kind of complex music, writing very tricky, intricate kind of chord progressions, but he still had this knack of being able to work them into a kind of a pop format. So McAloon's kind of guitar pop, the kind of classic jangle, was completely retooled by Thomas Dolby. Yeah, he uses every studio trick in the kind of the 80s playbook. He was a very early adopter of the Fairlight, kind of quite an early primitive sampler synthesizer, and the sound of the Fairlight completely dominates Steve McQueen. Yeah, the single off the album which finally broke it for them was When Love Breaks Down. It took 3 goes, 3 releases of this single for it to finally catch and become a chart hit. But yeah, there are some utterly amazing songs on this record. The songwriting is incredible. Songs like Appetite, Goodbye Lucille #1, otherwise known as Johnny Johnny. On side 2, there's a track called Desire As, which is amazing. Okay, moving on to 1987, and we get Husker Du, Warehouse, Songs and Stories. So, yeah, the days of the kind of that kind of soaring, grating, kind of chainsaw, pop, punk, hardcore noise of the band's SST days were done. They'd signed with Warner's, and Husker Du were finally kind of free, if you like, of Spot, who was the kind of the in-house producer for SST. You know, his hands were all on pretty much all the albums they ever did. They'd been slowly kind of supplanting Spot on the preceding couple of SST albums. So they co-produced as a band with Spot on New Day Rising, and they handled Flip Your Wig themselves. Yeah, their Warner's debut album from the previous year, 1986, Candy Apple Grey. It had effectively seen the band kind of take on this kind of more melodic approach, you know, more than ever before. In fact, I think it's probably fair to say that Candy Apple Grey might well be the first indie or alt rock album of the 80s. Yeah, it's a real break with hardcore punk. Yeah, this album, Warehouse, the follow-up, it's a double LP, and it completely cemented all that change that had come through on Candy Apple Grey. It is tighter, it is brighter, it is clearer, it is more focused sounding. I know there are a lot of fans of Husker Du who detest the production of this album. They just find it completely too trebly, lacking in bass. It's very dry. Anemic is a word I've heard as well. Personally, I've kind of grown accustomed to it. You just have to kind of accept that it is a product of the band at this time, at that point in the 1980s. And yeah, you just got to kind of grow to kind of love that signature sound and just try and appreciate the songs in themselves. Yeah, you wonder how they kept it together for this album, really. There were huge turmoil behind the scenes with the band. There were drug problems. There was feuding between Bob Mould and Grant Hart over the space that each of their songs had. I believe their manager committed suicide. It's amazing that they managed to produce this level of songwriting excellence over the course of a double album, with all that going on. Yeah, you get some Bob Mould classics here. You get Ice Cold Ice. You get Could You Be the One? Bed of Nails, It's Not Peculiar, Up in the Air. And from Grant Hart, yeah, some of his best songs so far. You get Back from Somewhere, She Floated Away, Tell You Why Tomorrow, and She's a Woman and Now He Is a Man. Yeah, this is still Husker Du. This is still that kind of melodic, hardcore, poppy, punky band. But you just need to tune your ears into the kind of the unique spectrum, the kind of the range of frequencies of this album. Acclimatize yourself. Take in the songs. It is a fantastic record. 1988, and we get to A Bell Is a Cup, Until It Is Struck by Wire. The production, yeah, is very, very crisp, heavily affected sound. Wire were always very progressive in that aspect. They always used heavily processed sounds using the technology of the day throughout their career. Yeah, A Bell Is a Cup kind of continues the kind of the moodier, lusher, kind of more expansive sound of 154 era Wire. But it's definitely, yeah, brighter, clearer, cleaner, poppier sounding. But anyway, yeah, you hear the pop music Wire that gave us songs like Dot Dash or Outdoor Miner or map reference 41 degrees north, 93 degrees west. It's still really, really clearly in evidence on A Bell Is a Cup. In fact, I think Kidney Bingos is a strong contender for the greatest Wire song of all time. it's this kind of syrupy nursery rhyme, nonsense verse, kind of assembled out of randomly kind of cut out tabloid newspaper headlines. It's just magic. It's just got this modernist kind of transportative pop song thing going on. And yeah, Colin Newman and Graham Lewis's voices, they've never meshed together quite as well as on this song. It's perfect. You get some classic Wire numbers as well, making their first appearance on A Bell Is a Cup. You get The Finest Drops, The Boiling Boy, you get A Public Place, and It's a Boy. They would rework these songs over the years, over and over again. Most kind of soon after this, on the kind of semi-live, semi-kind of studio album, It's Beginning to and Back Again. But even in more recent years, they've revisited these songs and reworked them, both on record and live. Yeah, A Bell in a Cup is a great record. And also in 1988, and the final of this list, we have 16 Lovers Lane by the Go-Betweens. Yeah, this was the band's last album together for a while with the kind of original lineup. They had quite a long layoff and they did reconvene in around about the year 2000 for the Friends of Rachel Worth. Yeah, Forster and McLennan famously kind of described the music of the Go-Betweens as having that striped sunlight sound. It's a lovely phrase, and this album is pretty much a perfect illustration of the kind of the beauty and the economy in that phrase. You get this bright, clear, sunny, warm, kind of dry, breezy kind of tone. Yeah, like Steve McQueen, the album we talked about, the Prefab Sprout album, it's very grown-up pop music. And yeah, like that album as well. Similarly, it's very pristine, perfect. But I think it's a little more organic. Yeah, 16 Lovers Lane is just a beautiful record. All the songs are credited as usual to Forster and McLennan. But, you know, the vocal contribution of each singer to the different songs is where the kind of the joy of the Go-Betweens lies. So yeah, Forster has this lovely, painterly, baroque kind of imagery in all of his lyrics and all of the songs that he sings on. Songs like Love Is a Sign and Clouds. Great, great music. And McLennan's got some great numbers on here as well. There's this galloping, breathless kind of pop song. It was a single here called Was There Anything I Could Do? And he can also kind of be more plaintive and more kind of dreamy. Quiet Heart is kind of one of his kind of more subdued love songs. Lovely stuff. And kind of right at the middle of the album is Streets of Your Town, the single, the big single, which is kind of an 80s jangle pop masterpiece, basically. Yeah, it fuses kind of hints the kind of Girl from Ipanema kind of rhythms with these shalala vocals. And it seems sunshiny and beautiful, but then there's this menace that kind of creeps in with some of the lyrics. Yeah, McLennan sings about this town is full of battered wives. Yeah, it's an incredible song. Yeah, 16 Lovers Lane is kind of a pretty magic record all round, really. Yeah, it's the perfect summation of the trajectory of the Go-Betweens through the 1980s. So there you go, a nice kind of sweet palate cleanser after all that, you know, nasty, dark, post-punk and grunge stuff. I hope you've enjoyed this list of 10. Yeah, I'm not suggesting these are all the greatest albums of all time, but there's a lot to like in a lot of these. And yeah, everyone needs a change of pace. So yeah, as usual, some things down there you can do. I'm fully expecting some comments about this one, but we'll see. Take it easy on me, yeah. But in the meantime, I hope you come back soon and forgive me and join me again. Bye for now.